Hey folks, Paul here, and today I thought I'd come out and just make a quick video. As I'm sure you're all aware, we've just ticked over into October, and just now is peak mushroom season, especially here in the UK. This is when everything tends to flourish around us. As I'm sat here now looking around, I can see at least 10 different species of mushrooms. But there's one mushroom I want to talk about today, and it's one that I think all of us as bushcrafters learn when we first sort of begin our journey of learning sort of natural materials, plants, trees and so on. Invariably when you start to learn about the trees that surround you and the uses they have, you then start to encounter mushrooms that then sort of grow on those trees or make use of those trees. And today I wanted to make a quick video on just a very basic mushroom, one that's often overlooked but has loads and loads of uses. But one of the uses is that it's a very, very good plaster. Now some of you may already know what it is I'm talking about. For those of you that don't, what I'm talking about is a mushroom called birch polypore, sometimes called a razor bracket or a birch bracket. The Latin for it is Fomitopsis betulina, and very, very useful for fire lighting. As the common name suggests, it can be used to sharpen knives. And another sort of thing it can be used for is to make plasters. So if you cut yourself, if you have an injury somewhere, you can create a plaster that will be very effective. Now, it's one of those skills that gets talked about quite a lot, and you very, very rarely see it done, which is a good thing. I don't want people going around cutting themselves and having to cover themselves in mushrooms, but it leads to some sort of myths surrounding the idea, and so I just thought I'd make a quick video to go over that and sort of show you my process for using the mushroom. So without further ado, let's go and look for some. We'll talk about the identifying features, where we can find it, when to look for it, and then from there we can take a look at actually making a plaster and applying it to ourselves. So let's go. Okay, so the first thing to consider, I suppose, would be when and where to look for the mushroom. I'm in what's known as coniferous woodland at the moment, so I have lots of pines and spruces and birch around me. And birch is the tree we're going to be looking for, and it's a very, very easy tree to identify. You may have spotted a couple scattered around me already, but for those of you that aren't quite sure what you're looking for, here's one I grew earlier. This is a birch tree. Again, very easy to identify because it's got these sort of lineations going across the bark. The bark is usually white, it can be a brilliant white. Sometimes it'll be sort of rough and scabby like this. Sometimes you'll find what's known as paper birch, which are very, very clean and they're just white trees, but very easy to identify. And you'll find it growing amongst, like I say, we've got Caledonian pine in here, we've got Norwegian spruce, there's some larch scattered around. So those are the sorts of trees it will associate with. It likes acidic soil, and you've got these lentils on the bark again, which are a very obvious sort of distinguishing feature. Again, if you're learning bushcrafting, the birch tree is something you'll probably be familiar with already. I think it's one of the trees we all learn about first because it's very useful for fire lighting, but that's what it is we're looking for. As the name suggests, birch polypore only grows on birch trees, but specifically it grows on dead birch trees, dead or very close to dead birch trees. The mushroom itself breaks down the wood and consumes that, and that's its sort of food source, if you like. So this tree is perfectly healthy and as such has no mushrooms growing on it, which is what we like to see. But for our sakes, let's go and see if we can find a dead one and identify some mushrooms on it. Okay, so here we have a birch tree that has been infected by the mycelium with the birch polypore. The mycelium is breaking down the wood. This tree has no top. You guys can't see that obviously, but it's been broken off in a storm or something. And so this is just a piece of dead standing birch. And you can see all the mushrooms growing on it. These are the mushrooms we're looking for. I'll bring you guys in closer to get a good look at them. Okay, so hopefully you'll be able to kind of see, apologies, I know the camera is not quite in the right place, but You can see here we've got this sort of nice light brown colour on top, very rounded, very smooth. Can have what looks like a stalk but isn't actually a stalk. At the very top, this is where the mushroom starts to protrude out of the tree. That's what this is here. This is a mushroom that's not yet grown. So it'll sort of protrude out the tree, and sometimes you'll end up with this little lump at the top, and then it sort of fans out. As it gets older, and these can grow up to the size of dinner plates, as it gets older, this margin, the edge of the mushroom here, can undulate and become very wavy, but when they're young like this, they stay very flat. Now you may also notice on this tree there are some green mushrooms. These are the same mushrooms as the ones we're looking for, so they're still birch polypore, but what's happened to these is these are probably last year's growth, and so these have been on the tree for an entire year. They're rotten. Insects and bugs have been eating them, and they're no use to us. What we're looking for is these nice brown smooth brackets. And a good test you can do to sort of judge the freshness of these mushrooms is to look underneath. And underneath it should be pure white, like a brilliant white almost. So if I cut this one off and bring it close to the camera and give you guys a look at that, that'll give you some idea of what it is you're looking for. Okay, so you can see there, it's a very, very brilliant white. And this is the mushroom we're looking for to make our plaster out of. Again, nice, even brown colour on top. A little bump there where it's connected to the tree where it's originally started growing. Oh, and the white spore tubes underneath. Now, like I say, we've got green ones and we've got brown ones. The green ones are the old rotten ones, the brown ones are the ones that are growing at the moment. When we're looking for these mushrooms, the season we want to collect them in is from sort of the start of September through until maybe early March. That's when the mushroom is growing, that's when it's nice and white like this, and that's when we can make use of it. So now that we've identified our mushroom and we've kind of picked the good ones from the bad ones, let's take it over to a stump and we'll talk about how we can make a useful plaster from it. Okay, so we've got our mushroom now. I'm just working on the stump here just to make things a little bit easier and safer for me. But we've gone through the selection of the mushroom, the identification, and what to look for, what to avoid, and we've come away with this mushroom, and this should be just about perfect for making a little plaster for my finger. Let's say hypothetically I've cut my finger. But before we do that, let's take a quick look at the actual structure of this mushroom. So I'm just going to cut a little slither here just so we can talk about what it is this mushroom is actually made up of. So on the outside here, and where we've got this brown layer, this is what's known as the cuticle. This is like a protective layer. It protects the inside of the mushroom from insects and any sort of parasites. In the middle here we have what's known as trama. This is like the flesh of the mushroom. This is the bit that's actively growing and pushing out. And then on the very bottom what we have is spore tubes. Now you might not even be able to see the spore tubes here very clearly, but there is a distinct layer that runs along the bottom, and it's very thin, but that basically is the three pieces that make up the mushroom. If I peel off the spore tubes here, you'll get an idea of it. There we go. So that's the spore tubes there, that little layer. So this is important because one of the misconceptions that goes around with these mushrooms and making plasters from them is that people will often cut the top of the mushroom thinking that's where they're going to produce their plaster from. So they'll cut a little rectangle shape into the mushroom, they'll cut it at each end, and then what they'll do is they'll try and sort of cut a slither underneath, just like this, and then that there becomes the plaster. Now there's nothing wrong with this, it will still act as a good plaster. It's still going to have all the properties of the plaster that we're looking for. So it's going to be antimicrobial, it's going to be antifungal, it's going to be styptic, so it's going to stop bleeding as well. But as you can see, it's quite chunky and uneven, and you're also dealing with the top layer of the mushroom, which is this dirty layer. This is where all the debris collects from the trees above, and so it's not the cleanest part of the mushroom either. The actual part of the mushroom we want to use, and the bit that often gets overlooked, is the spore tubes on the bottom. And again, exactly the same process. So we're going to take our knife, we're going to cut a rectangle. This is going to be the shape of our plaster on the size of it. we go over the edges here as well. And then what we do is we use our knife, or if you're lucky enough to have fingernails, you can use your fingernails just to pry it up. Just stick the knife in and pry up that little layer. And so what should happen is you end up with this layer that starts coming off. Hopefully there you'll be able to see it. This is the spore tubes we're taking off. Now the reason this is better than using the top and considered, in my opinion, the proper technique is because the spore tubes are exactly that. They are tubes. They are where the mushroom produces its spores. The spores drop out of the tubes and blow away in the wind. Those spores then go off to reproduce the mushroom. But because they're tubes, what they do is allow airflow. So where we have the mushroom we cut from, or the plaster we cut from the top of the mushroom, what we have is like an airtight seal. Whereas the tubes, which are microscopic in size, you can't see them with your naked eye, they allow airflow. And so it's a much better way of kind of protecting your cut. So you're not letting it get sweaty, you're not letting anything get stuck in there, you're allowing fresh airflow, oxygen into the skin. And all we have to do is just cut this little rectangle, pry up the end, and then gently pull the spore tubes off the bottom. Just like so. And then from there, we can put our mushroom to the side. You see we end up with this really nice, sort of very skinny, very even and slightly stretchy plaster that we can apply to our finger. So let's say hypothetically we've cut our finger here. What we do is we just wrap it around there. The other benefit to this is it will quite often stick to itself, so it doesn't need any securing with cordage. If you press it down a little bit with your finger, and then from there you've got a plaster that's kind of ready to go. And again, the properties of this plaster are that it's anti-bacterial, it's antifungal, which sounds sort of counterintuitive because when you think of a mushroom being antifungal, you think that's sort of self-destructive. You've got to remember what these mushrooms are doing are competing with other mushrooms in nature, and so they're looking to destroy or outcompete other mushrooms. And so it's antifungal and it's styptic as well. So styptic means that it will allow your blood to clot faster, and so you'll stop bleeding quicker as a result. And again, because we're using the spore tubes on the underside, it's porous, so it's allowing airflow into the wound, allowing it to breathe. It's not getting sweaty, you're not getting a build-up of sort of bacteria in there. And very quick, even, easy to use in comparison to cutting a section out of the top of the mushroom. So there you have it, folks. That's a very easy, quick sort of remedy for when you're outdoors. A little bit of natural first aid, if you will. Now, you'll see we still have this whole mushroom here we can sort of take plasters from, so you can see the section where I've taken the tubes out. But we also have bits next to it, and you can remove those as well. And this is handy because if you're looking at sort of living naturally, if you like, you can actually take these strips, these plasters, you can pull them off. There we go, we have another plaster. You can pull them off, and then what you can do is you can put that by the fire, you can put it in a container, you can just hang it up in a tree somewhere, and what will happen is it will dry. So just now it's nice and wet and stretchy. What you can do is you can dry it, and then you can allow it to be stored in a container somewhere, and then should you be out in the woods and cut yourself again, then you can just dip it in some water, it'll rehydrate, and then you'll be able to use it as a plaster again. So it's a really, really useful one to know. And you can see just how quickly you can produce them as well. Okay folks, so there you have it, a quick video on how we can use Fomatopsis betulina or the birch polypore to make very quick and effective plasters for any little nicks and cuts that we get when we're out in the woods. I really hope you've enjoyed that, and it's something I would actively encourage you to go out and practice. This isn't just one of those sort of flashy skills that isn't of any use. I actually I've used these quite a few times when I've been out in the woods and I've caught myself on a bramble or nicked myself with a knife, whatever it might be, and I would reach for this faster than I would like an actual first aid kit plaster. I really love the fact that it's natural. When you're done with it, you can just take it off and throw it away. It's not an issue, but it also works really, really well. So it's a skill well worth knowing and well worth practicing. Even if it's just for the fun of it, it's nice to be able to know that it's there as a resource to use. But not only that, when you actually use these skills, the sort of obscure skills you hear about now and again, you sort of bring life to them, and you can do away with the myths. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure filming it for you, and no doubt we'll catch up again soon. All the best.